Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Welcome back to classroom, everybody. Always a blessing to study together with you. Our study today is entitled Holy War, Taking Canaan. Now, don't be afraid when you hear that word Holy War. I don't think the Holy War we're talking about when we study from the Bible, it's a little different from the idea of the holy wars that we hear about going on today. Okay? But funny enough, it's still happening around the same part of the world as it was back in the Bible time. Our study is taken from our Torah portion for the week. For those of you that have been doing the Torah portions with us, you might know that we are starting the final book of the Torah, Deuteronomy. All right, and that's the first reading is from today. We are going to be reading through chapters 1, 2, and a portion of chapter 3 of Deuteronomy together today. Devarim means words. That's the Hebrew name for the book of Deuteronomy. If you remember all the books of the Torah, they take the first few words, and that's how they identify the name of that book. So in the beginning, that we know that's the beginning of Genesis. In Hebrew, the name for Genesis for in the beginning is Bereshit. Okay? So Devarim is what begins the book of Deuteronomy, and it says these are his words. Okay? The book of Deuteronomy, it takes place over the course of only a couple months. Okay? Remember, the Israelites were out in the wilderness for like almost 40 years. Okay? So from Genesis, you have creation. Exodus, you have Moses taking them out of Egypt. All right? And then you have the other books, Leviticus and Numbers. And all that happened over the course of, well, from Exodus till here, that's almost 38 years, okay? 39 years. So the book of Deuteronomy is only taking course over a couple months prior to entering into the promised land, okay? And this is the handoff from Moses being the one leading the people to Joshua, who would be leading them into the promised land. But remember that Moses was not allowed to enter the promised land. But here in Deuteronomy, this is where it kind of takes place in the whole timeline. All right? In 2000 BC, that's when the covenant was made with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then Joseph. At 1500 BC, they come out of Egypt. Right? Moses leads them out of Egypt. And this is the timeline where we are right now. Okay? Where we hand off from Moses to Joshua. So this is about 1500 years before Yeshua. Okay? Now, this book of Deuteronomy is a little bit different from the other books of the Torah. The first 4 books of the Torah, we get direct oracles from God, where we actually hear him giving his direct words. All right? But here in Deuteronomy, this is more like Moshe's version of Yeshua's Sermon on the Mount. So he's not giving new laws, he's not giving new commands. He's simply, it's more of a retelling, okay, of Yehovah's commands. If you hear me say Yehovah, that's how I pronounce the proper name for God. All right. Some people say Yahweh or Yahweh or Jehovah or Yahuwah. All right. So when you hear me say Yehovah, that's what I'm speaking about. Okay. So this Sermon on the Mount from Yeshua, you read that in Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. All right. We notice that he wasn't changing the law, but he was expounding on his Father's law. Okay? So he wasn't adding to it, he wasn't taking away from it. Neither was Moshe doing this. He wasn't adding to God's law or taking away from it. Okay? But he was explaining it for the context of this new generation. Okay? So let's start reading. Deuteronomy chapter 1. These are the words Moshe spoke to all Israel on the far side of the Yarden River, the Jordan, in the desert in the Arabah, across from Suf, between Paran and Tophel, Lavan, Hatzerot, and Dizahab. It is 11 days' journey from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea by way of Mount Seir. On the first day of the 11th month of the 40th year, so that gives us the timestamp, Moshe spoke to the people of Israel, reviewing everything Yehovah had ordered him to tell them. This was after he had defeated Sihon, king of Amori, who lived in Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth. and Edrei. There beyond the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moshe took it upon himself to expound this Torah and said, Jehovah spoke to us in Horeb. He said, you have lived long enough by this mountain. Turn, get moving, and go to the hill country, the Shephelah, the Negev, and by the seashore, the land of the Canaan, and the Lebanon, as far as the great river, the Euphrates River. I have set the land before you. Go in and take possession of the land Jehovah swore to give to your ancestors, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and their descendants after them. At that time I told you, you are too heavy a burden for me to carry alone. Jehovah your God has multiplied your numbers, so that there are as many of you today as there are stars in the sky. May Jehovah, the God of your ancestors, increase you yet 1,000-fold and bless you, as he has promised you. But you are burdensome, bothersome, and quarrelsome. How can I bear it by myself alone? Pick for yourselves from each of your tribes men who are wise, understanding, and knowledgeable, and I will make them heads over you, so tribal leaders. Verse 14, you answered me, what you have said would be a good thing for us to do. So I took the heads of your tribes, men wise and knowledgeable, and made them heads over you, leaders in charge of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and officers, tribe by tribe. At the time I commissioned your judges, hear the cases that arise between a man and his brother, and the foreigner who is with him. You are not to show favoritism in judging, but give equal attention to the small and to the great. No matter how a person presents himself, don't be afraid of him, because the decision is God's. The case that is too hard for you, bring it to me, and I will hear it. I also gave you orders at the time concerning all the things you were to do. So we left Horeb and went through all the vast and fearsome desert, which you saw on the way to the hilltop country of the Amori, as Jehovah our God ordered us. And we arrived at Kadesh Barnea. There I said to you, you have come to the hill country of the Amori, which Jehovah our God is giving to us. Look, Jehovah our God has placed the land before you. Go up, take possession, as Jehovah the God of your ancestors has told you. Don't be afraid, don't be dismayed. You approached me, every one of you, and said, let's send men ahead of us to explore the country for us and bring back word concerning what route we should use in going up and what the cities we will encounter are like. The idea seemed good to me, so I took 12 of your men, one from each tribe, and they set out, went up into the hills, came to the Eshcol Valley, and reconnoitered it. They took some of the produce of the land and brought it down to us. They also brought back word to us. The land Jehovah our God is giving us is good. But you would not go up. Instead, you rebelled against the order of Jehovah your God. And in your tents you complained. It's because Jehovah hated us that he has brought us out of the land of Egypt, only to hand us over to the Amori to destroy us. What sort of place is this that we're heading for? Our brothers made our courage fall, and when they said, the people are bigger and taller than we are, and the cities are great and fortified up to the sky. And finally, we have seen Anakim there. I answered you, don't be fearful, don't be afraid of them. Jehovah your God, who is going ahead of you, will fight on your behalf. Just as he accomplished all those things for you in Egypt before your eyes, and likewise in the desert, where you saw how Jehovah your God carried you, like a man carries his child. Along the entire way you traveled until you arrived at this place. Yet in this matter you don't trust Jehovah your God. Even though he went ahead of you, seeking out places for you to pitch your tents, and showing you which way to go, by fire at night and by cloud during the day. Jehovah heard what you were saying, became angry and swore, not a single one of these people, this whole evil generation, will see the good land I swore to give to your ancestors, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. He will see it. I will give him and his descendants the land he walked on, because he has fully followed Jehovah. Also, because of you, Jehovah was angry with me and said, you too will not go in there. Yehoshua, the son of Nun, your assistant, he will go in there. So encourage him, because he will enable Israel to take possession of it. Moreover, your little ones, who you said would be taken as booty, and your children who don't know, yet know good from bad, they will go in there. I will give it to them, and they will have possession of it. But as for yourselves, turn around and head into the desert by the road to the Sea of Suf." Then you answered me, "We have sinned against Jehovah. Now we will go up and fight, in accordance to everything Jehovah our God ordered us. And every man among you put on arms, considering it an easy matter to go up into the hill country. But Jehovah said to me, 'Tell them, don't go up and don't fight, because I am not there with you. If you do, your enemies will defeat you.' So I told you, but you wouldn't listen. Instead, you rebelled against Jehovah's order, took matters into your own hands, and went up into the hill country, where the Amori living in that hill country came out against you like bees, defeated you in Seir, and chased you back all the way to Ormah. You returned and cried before Jehovah, but Jehovah neither listened to what you said, nor paid you any attention. This is why you had to stay in Kadesh as long as you did." All right, so Deuteronomy chapter 1, he's retelling the whole journey of what happened to the Israelites after they left Egypt. Why they had to stay in this land for so long, why they were not allowed to go into the promised land. Okay. You saw there in Deuteronomy 1:20, I said, "You have reached the hill country of the Amorites, which the Lord our God is giving us." Now it's interesting, when you go back and study in the original Hebrew, the original Hebrew doesn't use tenses the way that we do, past, present, and future. It uses perfect and imperfect tenses. Okay? The term where it says, "which the Lord our God is giving us," it's this ongoing sort of active giving. It's not that he gave it to them in name before and they just have to go in and get it now. It's not that he's giving it to them just at this point in history. It's not that he's going to give it sometime in the future. It's an ongoing active giving. Because this land that he's giving them, ultimately it was his to begin with. The land of Canaan, the promised land that he was going to bequeath to the children of Israel, it was the Lord's land, Jehovah's land. Okay? And he's actively bequeathing it to this people. And we still see it today. The land, it is still for this people. Okay? So which the Lord our God is giving us. Remember, did he give it to them when they left Egypt? I mean, there was already a promise. The land was promised to them, but they hadn't entered it yet. But it was theirs to take. 40 years prior to this point in history, it was theirs to take, but they didn't enter it. Okay? God was already giving it to them. They hadn't received it. God was going to give it to them, again, letting Joshua bring them in, and they could start receiving it. All right? And we'll see in the future times where they are put out of their land and back in the land, and there's lots of wars going on over this little tiny bit of land. Deuteronomy 1:13 said, "Choose for yourself wise, understanding, and respected men from each of your tribes, and I will appoint them as your leaders." Now this is a very important part that we have to take note of. What Moses was doing, he said, "I can't handle this multitude of people coming at me." So each tribe would have a designated leader. It wasn't, whenever you hear the people grumbled against or the people said this, the people are represented by these tribal leaders. Okay? From the small group to the bigger group to the maybe church group and the larger community. Some are in charge of thousands, some in charge of only hundreds, and then some only tens. All right? But we see this leadership model here. Whenever you see the people complained and decided not to follow Jehovah, it was the leaders that went on behalf of the people. So Moshe wasn't talking to millions of people at one time. He was talking to maybe some tens, maybe hundreds that could hear him speak. But there's something about that leadership. How many of you here vote for your government leaders? Do you vote? Yeah, if you're old enough to vote, go and vote. Okay. There's something about when certain leaders are in a position and they have certain priorities, those of us that are living under their governance, all right, would be subject to how they rule things, right? We're not free from the decisions that they make as our leaders. That's why the Bible also tells us to pray for our leaders, even if you disagree with them. All right? Pray for them. I always pray that God just help them make the right decisions, that it won't affect us in terrible ways. All right? But there's also the model of leadership in our families. Okay? Headship. The father is answerable for everything that happens in his household, with his wife, with his children. All right? If they do something and act out of whatever, the father is answerable for their actions. All right? Because the father was supposed to teach them the proper way and discipline them, and when they fall out of line, well, you know what? The father has to suffer along with. Kind of like what happened with Adam and Eve in the garden. Right? Eve, she was under Adam's headship, the leadership there. All right, Eve did something wrong. Adam kind of followed suit. But you know what? It was up to Adam. The leadership, it held some accountability. Okay? And this was very relevant for this people as they traveled through the desert these last 40 years. They had hopefully good leaders. They were wise and knowledgeable, smart. These were upright people that were chosen. Okay? Not corrupt leaders. Another note here from chapter 1. The people ignore Jehovah and they try to take the promised land without his leadership and his permission. Okay, Jehovah commands Israel to take the promised land. The people become afraid and hesitate. The people decide that they're going to stop and evaluate whether they agree with God on this matter or not. They chose to disagree with him. God calls this disagreement rebellion, and he pronounces it judgment. The people, upon hearing the judgment, they repent and they say, okay, we're caught. We've changed our minds. We'll do what you say after the fact. God says, no. The time has passed and my offer is revoked. My judgment stands and the door is closed for you to enter. An important lesson here, friends. I know nowadays we sing about God's grace. Grace, grace, marvelous grace, and everything's grace, grace, and nothing matters. There was grace then as well. Grace is not a New Testament concept. Grace didn't come just after Yeshua died on the cross. Grace was always there. Okay? God gave his law because he is a gracious God. He gave a way to live right. Okay? And sometimes, how many of you here are parents? Parents, you have children that you have to raise, yes? Yeah? And sometimes your children don't do things the way you expect them to, right? And at some point your patience runs out. Yes? And there are consequences. Alright? There are always consequences to their actions. It's the same thing. Jehovah taught us how to parent. This is what he was doing to his people. He said, listen, you're rebellious, you keep going against me, and I call you out on it, and now it's too late. You say, okay, you caught me, I'm going to do what you say. I say, no, too late. You don't get to do what you want to do. You don't get what I'm giving you anymore right now. Right? A similar thing. God's grace also has limit. He puts the limit there. His patience will not last forever. He will choose to put a stop at a certain point. Okay? And we'll see that happen at an individual level as well. Everybody good? Deuteronomy chapter 2, let's go. Then we turned and began traveling into the desert along the road to the Sea of Suf, as Jehovah had said to me, and we skirted Mount Seir for a long time. Finally Jehovah said to me, you have been going around this mountain long enough. Head north and give this order to the people. You are to pass through the territory of your kinsmen, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir. They will be afraid of you, so be very cautious and don't get into disputes with them. For I am not going to give you any of their land. No, not even enough for 1 foot to stand on. Inasmuch as I have given Mount Seir to Esau as his possession, pay them money for the food you eat, and pay them money for the water you drink. For Jehovah your God has blessed you in everything your hands have produced. He knows that you have been traveling through this vast desert these 40 years. Jehovah your God has been with you, and you have lacked nothing. So we went on past our kinsmen, the descendants of Esau, living in Seir, left the road through the Arabah from Elat and Etzon Geber, and turned to pass along the road through the desert of Moab. Jehovah said to me, don't be hostile toward Moab, or fight with them, because I will not give you any of their land to possess, since I have already given Ar to the descendants of Lot as their territory. The Emim used to live there, a great and numerous people, as tall as the Anakim. They are also considered Rephaim, as are the Anakim, but the Moabim call them Amim. In Seir, the Horim used to live, but the descendants of Esau dispossessed and destroyed them, settling in their place. Israel did similarly in the land it came to possess, which Jehovah gave to them. Continuing, now get going and cross Vadi Zered. So we crossed Vadi Zered. The time between our leaving Kadesh Barnea and crossing Vadi Zered was 38 years, until the whole generation of men capable of bearing arms had been eliminated from the camp, as Jehovah had sworn they would be. Moreover, Jehovah's hand was against them, to root out of the camp until the last of them was gone. When all the men who were able to bear arms had died, and were no longer part of the people, Jehovah said to me, today you are to cross the border at Moab, at Ar. When you approach the descendants of Ammon, don't bother them or fight with them, for I will not give you any of the territory of the people of Ammon to possess, since I have given it to the descendants of Lot as their territory. This too is considered the land of the Rephaim. Rephaim, whom the Emori calls Zemumim, used to live there. They were a large, numerous people, as tall as the Anakim. But Jehovah destroyed them as the people of Ammon advanced and settled in their place. Just as he destroyed the Horim as descendants of Esau advanced into Seir and settled in their place, where they live to this day. It was the same with the Abim, who lived in the villages as far as Azah. The Kaphtorim, coming from Kaphtor, destroyed them and settled in their place. Get up, get moving, and cross the Arnon Valley. Here I have put in your hands Sihon the Emori, king of Heshbon, and his land. Commence the conquest, begin the battle. Today I start putting fear and dread on you into all the peoples under heaven, so that the mere mention of your name will make them quake and tremble before you. I sent envoy from the Kedemot desert to Sihon, king of Heshbon, with a peaceful message. Let me pass through your land. I will keep to the road, turning neither right nor left. You will sell me food to eat for money, and give me water to drink for money. I only want to pass through. Do as the people of Esau living in Seir and Moabim living in Ar did with me, until I cross the Jordan into the land Jehovah is giving us. But Sihon, king of Heshbon, would not let us pass through his territory, because Jehovah your God had hardened his spirit and made him stubborn, so that he could hand him over to you, as is the case today. Jehovah said to me, see, I have begun handing over Sihon and his territory before you. Start taking possession of his land. Then Sihon came out against us, he and all his people, to fight at Yahatz. And Jehovah our God handed him over to us, so that we defeated him, his sons and all his people. At that time we captured all his cities and completely destroyed every city. Men, women, little ones, we left none of them. As booty for ourselves, we took only the cattle, along with the spoil from the cities we had captured. From Aroer, on the edge of the Arnon Valley, and from the city in the valley, all the way to Gilead, there was not one city too well fortified for us to capture. Jehovah our God gave all of them to us. The only land you didn't approach was that of the descendants of Ammon, the region around the Yabok River, the cities in the hills, and wherever else Jehovah our God forbade us to go. Okay, so chapter 2. We see a little bit more. It's a contrast to what happened in chapter 1. Chapter 1 is talking about the first generation. Chapter 2 is talking about this second generation, after the first generation bearing arms, that they had all died off. The first generation, it was all about rebellion. In the second generation, they're learning obedience. Okay? Their parents, they're learning from their parents' failure. Because of their parents' rebellion, they know, well, we don't want to rebel against Jehovah the way our parents did. All right? We want to walk into the promised land. Our parents don't get to go in, but we were told we get to go in. All right? So why would you rebel against God and not allow that to happen? God told the first generation, there's the land, go in, take it, it's yours. But they didn't, and God called that rebellion. He's telling them the same thing now. There's the land, go in, and all they have to do is obey. And go in, take it, and it's theirs. The first generation was afraid. Oh no, they're giants. We don't want to go in there. It's creepy. There's no way we're going to be able to overtake them. They feared. They doubted. Even after they saw the mighty works of God that led them out of Egypt. Even after they crossed through the Red Sea that parted, ways that they could come to that mountain and get the words from God. All right? So this new generation, they come up. Some of them weren't born when they crossed the Red Sea. Some of them only heard the stories. All right? But they were learning obedience throughout the whole wilderness experience. So here you have the compare and contrast. First generation, they rebel. Second, they're obedient. First generation, they're told to march southward because they weren't going to go into the promised land. The second generation, he's leading them back to the promised land, march northward. All right, first generation, they were to enter the promised land from the southwest. The second generation, they were to enter the promised land from the southeast. The first generation told that they had stayed at Mount Horeb long enough. The second generation was told that they were skirting around the promised land long enough. The first generation knew that they would die in the desert. The second generation knew that they would live in God's set-apart land. Notice in the second part of Deuteronomy chapter 2, there are some nations, some lands where they were to avoid conflict. Israel was to pass through their land and be careful to avoid conflict. This was in the land of Edom. Edom is another name for Esau. Do you remember who Esau is? He's the twin brother of Jacob. And what's another name for Jacob? Israel. Okay? So these are relatives, kinsmen. Alright? From Esau's line. And it says, be careful when you go into their land. It's not like be afraid of them. But he's saying, be careful that you don't come into conflict with them. Okay? They heard about how God has led you through the wilderness. The fear of... I'll get back to that in a second. He said to do everything possible to make it clear to Edom that they have no intention of either taking their territory, not even taking food or water from them without paying for it. Okay? And then they also had to pass through the land of Moab, right? Does anybody remember who Moab and Ammon are? The Moabites and the Ammonites.
Children of the daughters of Job.
Of Lot?
Oh, sorry.
All right, remember Lot and his family fled from Sodom and Gomorrah. And he and his two daughters, his wife turned to a pillar of salt. He and his two daughters, they thought, oh no, everybody's burning. We might be the last people here on earth. The women were supposed to be married, but their fiancés were left behind. And they're like, oh no, how are we going to continue? So they each found a way to sleep with their father, Lot, and they each became pregnant by him. And they named their children Moab and Ammon. So the Moabites and the Ammonites on the east side of the Jordan, okay, that's where they're from. These are descendants of Lot, Abraham's nephew. Okay? We read about this Emim, counted as Rephaim. The Rephaim are the post-flood version of the Nephilim. If you remember back in Genesis chapter 6, it said the Nephilim roamed the earth. Okay? These were believed to be giants, all right? Where the fallen angels had mated with the daughters of man, and out came this, what's the word? Abomination of the Nephilim, the giants, all right? Now, that's why there was the flood, right? To wipe out this abomination, these things that were not created by God, all right? But the Rephaim, they were also large beings. Not nearly as big as the Nephilim, but they were large, warrior-type people. All right? Do you remember Goliath and David and Goliath? We read about how he was a giant. All right? And he kind of came from the same lands that we're talking about here. All right? But he was even a smaller version of what was existing, these Rephaim. It's no wonder when the Israelites went in to reconnoiter the land that they saw these really big people. And they must have been at least 10 feet or taller. Okay? 15 feet perhaps. Okay? And how do we know that? We actually will read about that in a second. So Israel was to avoid conflict with Edom, Moab, and Ammon. These were all relatives of Abraham. Okay? Jehovah had already given them these lands. So it wasn't put aside for Israel to take. You could say that these were the Gentile lands that God had apportioned already. Charge, let the holy war of taking Canaan begin. Chapter 1 ends with the people of Israel starting an unauthorized holy war because they went in after they repented, but God said, don't go, I'm not going to be with you, right? And they got beaten pretty badly. Chapter 2, there's this call to attack the Amorites in a true holy war. A true holy war because God is the one that's fighting it. Okay? They're going in under God's authority, and God is going with them. We read how Jehovah gives them into the hands of the Israelites. All right? Jehovah goes before them, all right, and hands them over. So all their enemies are, that's the holy war. This is a true one. They're following under the permission and the advisement of Jehovah. The victory is not only assured, but from a spiritual point of view, the war is already won. It's long over. I want to go back. We've talked about free will before. And free will, there are limits, there are boundaries. Doesn't mean you just keep doing and doing what you want and nothing's going to happen. Ultimately, God is still completely in control. All right? You remember reading about Pharaoh? All right? And Pharaoh was able to make his choices. He did whatever he wanted, and he got what he wanted. Right? Free will got him only so far. But what we've read about is what God did with his choices. You've always heard me say God works with our choices. All right? It doesn't mean that we're always making the right choices or the good choices. All right? Sometimes we make bad choices. And God could even work with those bad choices to teach us better lessons. Okay? But this king of Sihon that we read about, we read something about him that sounds very similar to what happened with Pharaoh. It says that God stiffened him, his mind, his heart. Whenever you read heart from a Hebraic perspective, especially here in the Old Testament, when you read heart, it's not talking about this feelings and emotions. The heart and the mind are synonymous. It's where you think, it's the thoughts, what you desire, what you dream of, your will. Okay? So we have to look at that. The desires of your heart, you will have them. If you desire things against God, then you will have that. If you desire the things of God, He will grow that. All right? He won't go against your will. He allows you to make the choices you want to make. But there comes a point where if He knows you're going to keep making the same choices, just like King Sihon did, so He stiffened him and hardened him even more. So there was no chance of him coming back anymore. Why? That's what he wanted. God gave him what he wanted. Same thing with Pharaoh. God gave Pharaoh what he wanted. That's it. There are limits and boundaries to our, what we think is called free will. God works with our choices. And just like we learned earlier, when He said, go in and fight, and they said, no, we're not sure yet. And then they realized they rebelled against God, so they repented. And then they said, okay, we're ready to go now. And He said, too late. Too late, you don't get to go. You don't get to fight them now. Okay? He works with our choices. Sometimes it sucks. All right? But it's what we chose. All right? Have you ever chosen somebody to date? And while you're dating them, you realize is not a good choice. You chose them, and you got what you wanted. You weren't sure what you were getting into, but you know what? That's your choice. Yeah.
Frequently, the point is a recurring thing where we say, if Jehovah knew that our choice was wrong, or it would result in something not for our benefit. The question usually arises, why did he not stop us?
Why didn't he stop us? Why didn't he intervene?
Yeah, why didn't he intervene? It's a frequent thing that comes up.
Because if he does, then Satan was right.
In charge.
If he does, then Satan was right.
It's funny, it's like when we're making our choices, we don't want God to interfere. Because we want our choice. We said, you gave us the freedom to choose. Right? And then when we choose wrong, we're like, why didn't he do anything to fix it? It's your choice, man.
I always tell my daughter, you're free to choose whatever you want, but you're not free to choose the consequences.
That's true. There are always consequences to our choices, right? Yeah.
I think anyone who's become a parent, and I encourage young people, this is a natural design to become a parent. Whether it's to a pet, whether it's to when we mentor another young person, you don't understand what it's like. Because anyone who becomes a parent, you see the heart of God, you see what he goes through, how much you're willing to sacrifice, what you're willing to let go, how much they swear and spit in your face. And he gives grace and grace and grace, but there is a limit, even with us. If you kick the kid out, there are consequences, right? This is the part of the God. Why do we call him Father God? Why? He created that design from the very beginning.
I just want to share what Pastor Bequila shared with us this week. There was this guy who said, there's no God. If there's a God, let the lightning, God, let the lightning hit me. And so Pastor Bequila said, if you're a parent and your son asks you to shoot him, say, if God asks you to shoot him, even though I have a gun, I'm not going to shoot him because I love him. I'm a swear God. Why would he kill you? Because you haven't really known the true God is. That's why he's going to give us a chance.
That line is one of mockery, you know, like even if he got hit by lightning, well, he won't be alive to know that he did that God struck him with lightning. Yeah. All right, ready to go on? We'll finish off the first part of chapter 3. You good? Oh, there was a point I wanted to make. Okay, so while the first generation died off in the wilderness and they were rebellious, I have a question. Who was redeemed from Egypt? All of Israel. First generation and second generation, they were all redeemed from Israel. They were already redeemed, but they made their choices, and there were consequences to their choices. Did God still lead the Israelites to the promised land? Yes, he was still fulfilling his promise, but there were consequences to the choices that were made along the way. Okay? They were still redeemed. All right? Sometimes I think, especially as New Testament Christians, we think, oh, we're redeemed. Nothing could go wrong. Me and God were good, and I could do no wrong. Everything I do, I'm going to get everything from God that I need. And no, there are still consequences to your choices. Just like the Israelites, they were all redeemed from Egypt. They were all saved from the bondage of the slavery, right? Just like we were all saved from bondage to sin. But we're still going to make choices along the way that will have consequences. We will still trip up, we will still sin. But we've been redeemed. Don't forget that. You've been redeemed on this side of the cross. You've been saved from the bondage. But if it feels like you're still stuck in the sin, it's just you're choosing it. I can say it no more plainly. We get stuck in our sin because we choose it. We can blame the devil and say, he tempts me, he makes it so hard, but we still choose it. Okay? We could choose to give in to the temptations, but we know that God promised that he will always make a way out. Do we trust that? If we trust that, it will become easier to obey and walk in obedience to him. Okay? We're good? Let's continue. Deuteronomy chapter 3, verses 1 only to 22. Then we turned and went up the road to Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out against us with all his people to fight at Edrei. Jehovah said to me, don't be afraid of him, for I have handed him, all his people, and his territory over to you. You will do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amori, who lived at Heshbon. So Jehovah our God also handed him over to us, Og, the king of Bashan, with all his people, and we defeated him until he had no one left. At that time, we captured all his cities. There was not one city of theirs that we didn't capture. There were 60 cities, all the region of Argob, the kingdom of Og in Bashan, all of them fortified cities with high walls, gates, and bars, in addition to a great number of unwalled towns. We completely destroyed them, as we did with Sihon, king of Heshbon, annihilating every city, men, women, and little ones. But we took all the livestock along with the spoil from the cities as booty for ourselves. At the time we captured the territory of the two kings of the Amori, east of the Jordan, between the Arnon Valley and Mount Hermon. The Hermon, which the Sidonian call Sirion, and the Amori call Sinir. All the cities of the plain, all Gilead and all Bashan, as far as Salcah and Edrei, city of the kingdom of Og in Bashan. Og, king of Bashan, was the last survivor of the Rephaim. He was one of those big guys. His bed was made of iron. It is still in Rabbah with the people of Ammon. It was 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide, according to the normal cubit. That would be 13.5 feet by 6 feet. It's like 2 king-size beds put together. Of this land that we took possession of them, I assigned to the Reubenites and the Gadi the territory extending from Aroer along the Arnon Valley together with half the hill country of Gilead, including its cities. The rest of Gilead and all Bashan, the kingdom of Og, I gave to the half-tribe of Manasseh. The whole region of Argob, together with all of Bashan, formed what is called the land of Rephaim. Yair, the son of Manasseh, took all the region of Argob, as far as the border with the Geshuri and the Maakati. He named this whole area, including Bashan, after himself. It remains Havot Yair to this day. I gave Gilead and Mahir, and to the Reubenites and the Gadi, I gave the territory from Gilead to the Arnon Valley, with the middle of the valley as a border, as far as the Yabok River, which is the border with, don't worry, I have maps, with the people of Ammon and the Arava too, the Jordan being its border from Kinneret to the Sea of the Arava, the Dead Sea at the foot of the slopes of Pisgah to the east. At that time I gave you this order: Jehovah your God has given you this land to possess, but all of you who are fit to fight must cross over, armed ahead of your brothers, the people of Israel, your wives, your little ones, and your livestock. I know you have much livestock. Will stay in your cities which I have given to you, until Jehovah allows your brothers to rest, as he has allowed you. And they too take possession of the land Jehovah your God is giving them on the west side of the Jordan. At that point you will return, each man to his own possession, which I have given you. Also at that time I gave this ponder to Yehoshua. Your eyes have seen everything that Jehovah your God has done to these two kings. Jehovah will do the same to all the kingdoms you encounter when you cross over. Don't be afraid of them, because Jehovah your God will fight on your behalf. See, that's the real holy war. It's when Jehovah goes ahead and fights on their behalf. They're following his instructions. Go to this land, conquer it, take over this. I'm handing them over to you. Okay? It's kind of concerning, though, when we read and we say, wait, hold on, so all the women, children, everybody, they were obliterated from the King Sihon and King Og, and everybody in those territories? None of them lived. And we say, well, how can you serve a God that's so heartless like that? Remember, the leadership of that nation cost them their lives. King Sahir did not want to let them pass through. He was ready to go up against them. They were trying to make peace with him, but when he said, no, you won't pass through here, because the fear of the name of the Israelites was well known. All the nations feared them because they know what God did for them those 40 years in the wilderness. And if they're coming into their territory, it's the king's like, no way you're coming into our land. We're going to stand. This is our land. You're not taking it. And they're like, we just want to pass through. We don't want anything from you. But he was so set in his mind, and God stiffened his heart. And because of that, he was an enemy to God. So God said, okay, all these people here, you go in, I hand them over to you, don't leave anything left behind. No people survived. Now imagine these two huge kingdoms under King Sahir and King Og. Everybody in the surrounding nations would have heard about what happened to these people. Everybody in the land of Canaan would know the fame of the God of Israel. And when Israel comes into Canaan, you better believe they're all freaking out, because they know what happened on the other side of the Jordan. Here at the south side, this is Edom and Moab, where they passed through. All right, they skirted around Moab, they skirted around Edom, they passed through Moab peaceably. They didn't, they were very careful, as God commanded them, not to come into conflict with these nations. And as they moved up here, the Heshbon Valley, and Edrei, and Bashan, all these areas here where the big people were, the Rephaim, where the giants were. And Jehovah gave all these nations into their hand. Here's Canaan. This is the promised land that was spoken of on this side of the Jordan River. You remember that they were going to be camping out. They said, march northward. They were to approach the promised land from the southeast. Right? So they were coming up through Moab and Edom, all the way up here, and they would be right here before they crossed over the Jordan River, just like they crossed through the Red Sea before. They were crossing through a dry land on the Jordan River into the land of Canaan. And the first battle they had there was with Jericho. And you're going to read about that in the next book of the Bible, Joshua.
Oh.
All right? So after the Torah, the next book is Joshua. And this is what happened when they entered into the promised land. It's a really cool story. Now, I don't know if you don't like Bible, you think it's boring or whatever else. Like, I don't know, you might like epic movies, right? It's like a big epic movie. If you just read the Bible, like it's not some religious book, and you're reading it just for the historic conquests and everything else, and you find the maps and you see how it works, it's really cool stuff. I recently watched a film telling of the story of David on a TV, on Prime. It's called House of David. And it's really cool to kind of see the retelling of the story happening like visually, right? And it's always like these men, their armies, and they just have spears, you know, and they're going to war. And it's totally different from war that we see today. But the holy war that we see here, these are men on their feet, moving with their families, their whole lives behind them, you know? And they're moving across the wilderness, moving through these nations, and they're going to war with these people, and God's handing them over. And sometimes all they have are these spears. Wait till you see what happens in Joshua when they take Jericho. See how they won over that city. And remember, these cities, they weren't like small little towns, like small barangays or whatever, right? These were like fully developed cities, high fortified walls. All right, they were taking over some big major cities here. That would be taking down like Toronto, Chicago, LA, hitting all the big ones, right? It's not like going to Idaho or, hey, Richmond Hill, yeah. All right, but they took over all that land. And the fear of their name was upon all the nations around them. So God uses opportunity to establish that. Okay? We read about some of the tribes, Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Remember? So when you look on this map, this is on the east of the Jordan River. Okay? It was where the big guys lived. But this was very fertile land. They wanted to stay there because these particular tribes had huge amounts of livestock. They needed to be able to keep them and maintain them, right? So they wanted to settle on the east side of the Jordan because of all that lusciousness. And Jehovah gave that to them. Remember, these were conquered before they went into Canaan. And Jehovah said, okay, here you go. This is your land. You can have it. And you can return to it, but all the fighting men that are able to bear arms, you will continue to go with all your brothers, cross over the Jordan, and take over all these lands that Jehovah was handing over to them. Okay? They still had to go in, bear arms. They still had to go in and conquer the lands. Sometimes in our life we feel, well, I got what I want. I'm going to stop here. God already gave me what I want. I don't need to worry about anybody else. Oh, I'm already saved. Forget about everybody else. Too bad for them. They're on their own. I'm already saved. Imagine if these three tribes had that same mentality. They were given all this. That's not even the promised land. They're not even in the promised land, but they got to enter into it when they had to help their brothers take over all of it. And then they were allowed to go back and live their lives in that land. Okay? So there's something about that Jehovah wants to teach us about brotherhood. Okay? You don't just take what's just yours and say, well, this is good enough for me, forget about everybody else. You're still in accountability, supporting each other, journeying together, fulfilling God's purposes together. And everybody gets what's theirs in the end, anyway. But we still need to be concerned for one another. Okay? None of this bahalaka. You don't give up on your brothers. Right? It said, love your brothers. Love your neighbors. Right? Have a special love for the believers. Okay? It's interesting, though. Why would Jehovah allow these three tribes to settle here on this land? Remember, the descendants of Abraham, he allowed Moab and Ammon and Edom, he allowed them all to have their land. They were not the Israelites, they were Gentiles. Okay? Well, Gentiles, they were Hebrew, right? From Hebrew descent, but they were not the Israelite nation. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay? But let's go back to Genesis and read what it said when Jehovah first spoke to Abram. Jehovah said to Abram, after Lot had moved away from him, look all around you from where you are, to the north, the south, the east, and the west. All the land you see I will give to you and your descendants forever, and I will make your descendants as numerous as the specks of the dust of the earth, so that if a person can count the specks of the dust of the earth, then your descendants can be counted. Get up and walk through the land and breadth of the land, because I will give it to you. He goes and expounds a little further, in chapter 15, 18 to 21. That day Jehovah made a covenant with Abram. I have given this land to your descendants, from the valley of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates River, the territory of the Keni, the Kenizi, the Kadmoni, the Hitti, the Prizi, the Rephaim, the Amori, and the Canaani, and the Gerashi, and the Yebusi. When you look at that, let's go back to that. There's the Jordan River. The Euphrates is all the way over here, right? So all that land, Moab, Edom, everything that fills in between the Euphrates, all the way to this sea here, okay? All that land was spoken to Abraham for his descendants, all right? But the Israelites were just part of the descendants of Abraham, all right? And that's the land that was promised to the Israelites. Now, just how big is this land of Israel? Why is everybody still fighting over Israel? You know, you see the Palestinians saying, no, this is our land, they don't belong here, we have a right to the land. Look how tiny the wall is. Let's consider, look at the Philippines. The Philippines is 300,000 square kilometers of living space, the Philippines, the Philippine Islands. Israel is only 21,937 square kilometers. That's how small and tiny Israel is.
The size of
The
the
land.
state of New Jersey.
The size of the state of New Jersey. That's how small Israel is. And you turn on the TV and you see all the news about these bombings, everyone trying to fly. Imagine everyone trying to fly over New Jersey and bomb New Jersey? Just because someone wants to live in a small little neighborhood of New Jersey? It's ridiculous, right? Hey, Canada's pretty close to New Jersey. What if Canada was the one sending over missiles, trying to bomb New Jersey, just so we could invade? It's ridiculous, right? All those nations we just talked about, on the east side of the Jordan River, all those neighboring cities, neighboring countries around Israel, how many thousands of years ago was this? The war for Israel, the war for Canaan, the land, it's still going on today. I'd say this is the world's longest and oldest war
Cousins.
between relatives. Isn't that something? You ever watch that show, Family Feud? Man. Later on, when you continue reading the Bible, you're going to see that land of Canaan, the land of Israel, divided into two separate kingdoms. Okay? Israel, Ephraim, Israel, and Judah. Those are the two houses, two kingdoms, the two houses that make the whole house of Israel. Okay? And notice here, Manasseh, Reuben, and Gad, it's all still joined together here. Okay, with 10 tribes, and then the 2 tribes here. Look at who was inhabiting the land of Gaza at the time. The Philistines. That's where the Philistines were, in Gaza. Isn't it interesting that in today's modern map, we have Israel here, occupied Palestinian territories, still include here the West Bank, right, Eastern Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. The same place where the Philistines were those thousands of years ago. They staked their claim, but that land belongs to Jehovah. And Jehovah bequeathed that land to his chosen people called Israel. And it's still going on today. Interesting, huh? So today's story was a little bit more of, today's study was a story, the history of that land. How it was conquered, how Jehovah gave it to Israel, well, a precursor to how he gave that land to Israel. And here, in the land of Israel, you see all these different nations that were given into their hands. The Amorites, Canaanites, Jebusites, Perizzites, Hittites, all of them given into their hand, and the Philistines. This land is yours for the taking. The Lord your God is giving it to you today. He'll drive out the 7 nations living there now. Each nation is larger and stronger than you are. And indeed, Jehovah kept his word. Is there anything that you're facing that seems impossible? Like maybe God is pointing you in a certain direction, a change of course in life perhaps. And you look forward and you're like, it's just too hard. There's just too much at stake. It's impossible. Is God really leading me here? We start to doubt, we start to question. If you've ever sincerely prayed and asked God for direction and guidance in your life, and he starts guiding you a certain way and you say, I'm not sure that's God leading me there. I don't want to go there. That's not what God wants for me. And you pray again, and you pray again, and for some reason He keeps leading you to the same place, but you're saying, no, I don't want to go where He's sending me. I don't want to do what He's asking me to do. Right? Let's put it this way. Is there anybody in your life that you need to forgive? If there's somebody in your life you know you need to forgive, just put your hand up. There's someone that you still need to forgive, somebody in your life. Yeah? If Jehovah is coming to you and touching your heart and saying you need to go and forgive that person, and you say, but Jehovah, you don't know what they did to me. They don't deserve my forgiveness. What? Is there a reason why you haven't forgiven that person yet? If Jehovah calls you to forgive somebody, and you're like, but I don't want to forgive them. I could never forgive them. That's your choice. That's your choice. You have the free will to choose not to forgive somebody. Because what they did apparently was so evil, but here you are today, still having your life. I don't know how evil it really was. But no matter how wrong and evil it was, we are still called to forgive and pray for our enemies. Can you do it? Will you do it? What if God's using me today to say, think about that person you need to forgive? And God's saying, forgive them now.
What if it's you?
What if it's yourself that needs forgiving? Yeah. Leave it to my wife to throw that deep one in there. What if it's you that needs forgiveness? You gotta forgive yourself. Receive God's forgiveness for yourself. When we don't follow God's instruction, friends, you know what that's called? Rebellion. It's one or the other. There's no middle ground. You either rebel or obey. Choosing to sit and do nothing is not obedience. Choosing to sit and do nothing when God is calling you to do something, that's disobedience. If you don't think that's fair, and you're a parent, and you ask your child, please put your toys away. They don't touch the toys. They don't put it away. They don't move it. They don't make more mess, but it's still there. Did the child obey you? No. If you bend down to pick up their toy and you're like, oh, ouch, your back goes out. Oh. Or you step on their Lego. Why didn't you pick this up? And then the kid comes running. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm coming, I'm going to put it away. The parent says, no. Too late, the damage is done. You didn't put it away, you didn't obey me. Same thing in our walk with God. We think we still have time. We put it off. When God says move, we don't move. When God says wait, we go ahead of Him. When God says forgive, we say, you don't know what you're talking about, God. What? You don't know what a bad thing that person did to me? If God is calling you to do the impossible, what would that look like today? What's something impossible that God would be calling us to do today? Maybe He's calling you to leave your job. It's a good paying job. There's lots of money there, but it's not right. And you know in your spirit, you're like, why am I still waking up every day for this job? Well, the money's good. We tell ourselves the money's good. But God's like, no, you are not glorifying me in this. What you're doing is compromising your own beliefs. You're sinning against yourself, choosing to be there. If God calls you to get up and leave that job, and there's no other job lined up for you, will you leave? It's a tough one.
like that rich young ruler. And he said to Jesus, Yeshua, what else do I have to do in order for me to have eternal life?
Yeah.
Sell all my possessions and give it to the poor and follow me. And he
Can't do it. We're all given choices every day. All right, guys? We have the choice to follow God and obey Him or go against God. Here's the problem. If we don't study the Word of God, if we don't know what God wants, how will we know how to obey Him? We won't know. How will we know if we're disobeying Him? We won't know. There's something called the lawless one. When you don't have a law to live by, and you're a lawless one, then there's no standards for your life. Anything goes. And whatever you get, that's all you get. And you can't blame anybody for it because that's all that there is. It is what it is. We just leave it like that. But if there's a law or instructions for living in telling you the right way to live, and you choose to live otherwise, you rebel against that law. If you live according to it, that's obedience to that law. How many of you like following the law? When you're on the road, how many of you like driving following the law? You gotta get somewhere, but the speed limit is only 40 kilometers an hour. It depends. It depends on the law is the law and it's always there. All right? Depending on the situation, depending on our circumstance, we're going to change the way that we react or respond to that law. Right? If there's a law that's meant just for men, it doesn't apply to women. Right? But that law is still a law even though the woman doesn't fall under it. Right? God's law is His law. It's His instructions for living. It's His will, it's His rule, it's His way. It's what He wants for the people that He created. Okay? That's all that it is.
For our benefit.
It's for our benefit. If we live in accordance with His law, things go well with us. We can live in peace knowing that we are at peace with God because we are not rebelling against Him. We are obedient. Things go well with you. Children, obey your parents. Things go well with you. Do you see that principle God built into that command for children with that first authority figure in their life? Obey your parents, honor them, things will go well with you in the land. Same thing. We don't rebel against our government, right? They're the ones governing over us and we're at the mercy of whatever they're doing. You pray for them, pray that they're making the good decisions. Things will go well with us here in Toronto. Okay? But if your parents are going against God's ways and expecting you to do the same, then it's okay for you to follow and do what God says first. If the government says you are not allowed to worship your God anymore, then it's okay for you in God's law that you don't bow down to their gods, you bow down only to your God. See that? You saw stories of that happen in the Bible. Daniel's friends, they refused to bow down to the authorities that are there because they worship only one God first, above everybody else. Your obedience is to Jehovah first, before anybody else.
Okay. So I'll say one thing. This morning in Lanny and Brian, now we're talking about being envious with other people. Because if you're envious with other people, you'll never be happy.
Yeah.
And that's when thou shalt not come back, right?
Yeah.
So it's amazing when someone will remind you not to envy at all. Be happy for them instead of
Yeah, absolutely. Be satisfied with our lot in life. All right, be grateful for everything that we have. We don't grow envious or covet what other people have. That's why it's one of the laws of God, right? Be content where you are. And don't compare yourself to other people. Right? Yes.
It's interesting that God's laws, we always assume it's impossible to keep all of God's laws. Well, all of God's laws don't apply to us. If you're not of age to drive, does the driving law apply to you? No. But once you become eligible and responsible to step into that, you will be held accountable to that. The laws that God gave, some of them were for men, some of them for women, some of them for priests, most of them were for priests.
Yeah.
But we assume, oh, well, God's law, it doesn't apply to me because that was for the Old Testament. When we read the Bible properly and understand that certain laws were for certain groups, other laws apply to all the people. Certain laws apply to specific leaders. When we have that mindset and context, then we understand, well, God's law is good because it's for, He gives each according to what He has given. Everybody is given a different lot, and that speaks to what Uncle Manny just said. Don't compare what lot you were given, because those laws and responsibilities and accountabilities that apply to you will not apply to someone else. Everybody's lot is different.
And God's law is good, right? Do we agree God's law is good? Yes. Why do people hate it? Because maybe it doesn't allow them to do the things they want to do. But if they don't believe in the God that gave that law, then what does it matter?
It doesn't.
But why do they feel like, oh, but God said I can't do that? But you don't care what God said, so then go do what you want. That's your choice. God did that with the people in the Bible. If that's what you want, go ahead. That's your choice. God doesn't enforce Himself on us. He never will. He patiently waits for us to come back to Him, to return. Oh.
Scripture also says that He allows men to, He allows men, He gives what man desires,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and He doesn't intervene.
Yep. Yes.
So, popular verse that everybody knows, the wages of sin is death, which is another way of saying the consequences of sin is death. So when people choose lawlessness, they're actually choosing death.
Yep.
And it made me, think, when you're talking about the women, the children, the men, everything, they were all destroyed. It's because they chose to rebel against. They didn't follow what God was saying, right? That's why God separated, elected. So they chose a path that led to death. And God gave them their choice. Again, we're free to choose whatever we want, but not from the consequences. So if you choose to follow lawlessness, you're choosing death.
Yeah.
And one way or another, sometime or another, you're going to get your wishes, which is death. It all leads to death, right? So God was just simply giving them what they desired, which was, lawlessness.
Yes.
Just to add to what he said, just like that couple who attended the Coldplay concert. Okay, they sinned, but if the wages of sin is death, how come they're still alive? But every time you sin, you die spiritually. That's the worst kind of death.
Well, the couple got what they deserved. They lost everything, right?
I mean, it was an unfortunate incident, I'm sure. I'm sure there were other people there doing the same thing.
I know, but I think the message is loud and clear. Here's somebody the world looks up to, right?
Sure.
Be careful when you're attending.
CEO, top of the world, and what careless moment it all came crashing down. What more do you want?
Watch out for spotlights.
Don't go to Coldplay concerts
Even in the Blue Jays game.
or Blue
Blue
Jays.
Jays came to kiss cam.
We don't do the kiss cams.
No. Well, I mean, so today's study, it was a Torah portion study. I hope you're encouraged to continue studying through the book of Deuteronomy. Remember, it's a review of everything that happened up to this point. And it also, as we continue to read Deuteronomy, it's going to be pointing us toward how the second generation is now going from the theory of God's law to practical living, because some of God's law was not to be implemented until they entered into the promised land. So even the law was established 40 years before for the Israelites, and they couldn't even keep any of it until now, the second generation entering into the promised land. Okay? So just because God's law is there, remember, guys, God's law, first of all, it is forever. It is eternal, it still stands, it still applies. I don't know why people, especially Christians, keep saying that the law was nailed to the cross. That when Jesus said it is finished, that it meant that God's law is done away with. If God's law is gone, then what is a lawless one? Like, everybody would be a lawless one if God's law is no longer relevant. Okay? But his principles, the principles of his law, it still stands true today. That's why we study Torah. That's why we teach it to the generations. That's why we hope more people will want to start walking in obedience to the ways of Jehovah.
His promises are also...
His promises are continuous. We see that with the land. His land that he has set apart for his people, and Jehovah is still using that as a mark. And people are so threatened by this Israel nation.
How many times have all those big nations tried to fight Israel to this day?
Now stop and consider, even the government of Israel, as corrupt as it might be, like all the other world governments are, I'm not agreeing with all the worldly things that Israel is doing today. But regardless of what they're choosing, Jehovah is still the one holding this thing in place. There is no way that all these nations come against Israel and Israel's still standing there. There is no way that they would still be able to stand for these, how many thousands of years? And Jehovah is keeping it that way until it's time for the return. There's a special thing about this land, a special thing about these people, okay, and this place. When Jehovah comes back, when Yeshua comes back again, guys, guess what? This is the land that he's walking into. This land is still there for his purposes. Remember, it's his land. Given to Israel for now. All right? But ultimately, this is where he's establishing his kingdom. That's why it matters. Okay? That's why it matters. Any more questions, comments before we close? All right. Study the Torah, guys. If you haven't started Torah portions, get on it. We're in the last book of the Torah, and we're going to be starting the cycle again in the fall. Okay, so every year we keep repeating the Torah. All right? Love you guys. God bless you. Okay? May the grace of our Lord Yeshua and the shalom of Jehovah our Father be with us all.